here on Kaieteur Radio. So tune in to 99.1 or 99.5 FM every Tuesday night at 20 hours for Petroleum 101 with me, your host, Kemol King. Kaieteur Radio, the radio with a difference. Good night, folks. Welcome to Kaieteur Radio's Petroleum 101, where we discuss with you the latest developments in your oil and gas sector. I'm your host, Kemol King, and tonight we're joined by none other than Dr. Taran Kemraj. Dr. Kemraj is a professor of economics at the University of South Florida, and Mr. Dr. Kemraj, forgive me, he is part of the Oil and Gas Governance Network, which is I would call it a pressure group that was formed to advocate for prudent management of the oil and gas sector. Some of the things that the Oil and Gas Governance Network has called for include the scrutiny of the oil company's costs and the renegotiation of the oil contract, the Stabroek Block Agreement, to be specific. So, and Dr. Kemraj has written about some of these things. Dr. Kemraj is Guyanese, so before we get into any economics discussion, first I'm going to ask him to just tell you a little about himself and his upbringing in Guyana. Over to you, sir.
Hi, Kamal. Thanks for having me on. Yes, I'm from the East Bank of Demerara, Houston, in particular, and I my formative years were in Guyana. I went to the University of Guyana. I did economics there. I worked at the Bank of Guyana. I taught at UG for a year. So I mean, I played a lot of cricket, caught a lot of fish, crabs, and so on. So I've done a lot of stuff. So, but of course, in my the other part of my life is that I spent a lot of time writing about various aspects of Guyanese economy, Caribbean economy, and other economies. But I spent a lot of time on Guyana. I thought there were lots of puzzles that I needed to understand, and I set myself out to study them. I like to think I have some of the uh, answers that I set out to find now. Don't have them all, but at least I think I have some. Well, my entry into the oil and gas discussion was really to use some of my skills as an economist because, as you might know, I mean, economists are trained with a vast array of skills that can be applied to many sectors, whether it's oil and gas or management or health care. epidemiology, as we've seen now in the US, that economists have been on the forefront, making suggestions on how to tweak the epidemiological models so that you can have better forecasts of death. And so, I mean, I don't do that, but what I'm saying is it's often think that, these things are all abstract, but they have tremendous applications to various life aspects of life. And so one of the things I did early when I got a contract several years ago was to use my knowledge of economics, and take a look at the contract. So if you would have looked at some of the essays I wrote in the Starbuck News and elsewhere, you would see that I spent a lot of time on the cost side because that's my skill set. We often, unfortunately, think that these things are, you have to be trained in in the oil sector. Of course, I'm not a geophysicist, so I don't get involved in that discussion. That's not my skill. But these are multidisciplinary endeavors, right? So yeah, so I use that to do a lot of work on write a lot about the contract. I did some forecasting of what government revenues can be and so on. And of course, I do have some strong views about the political aspects of it. So all of that, this is all public records. I would think many people would be able to access these. And I've done some more formal academic writings. The way you write columns is not the same way you explore, these questions in a more academic setting where, you have to be true to what was written before and express your contribution in that vein and what unique you bring into the discussion and so on. Um, so these, as I said, you can find these things online, and so I hope I've answered your question. So is this show on? Is it just a radio or is it TV? People can actually see us. How is this
This
working? If you don't
show
mind.
is on the radio and it's also on our Facebook Live.
Oh, your Facebook Live.
It'll
Okay.
also be on our YouTube channel as well.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so before we get into any discussion, another question I have to ask is a due diligence question. Kaieteur News is big on due diligence as an anti-corruption watchdog. So my question to you is, have you any political aspirations or loyalties or any connections with oil companies and oil service companies operating offshore Guyana?
No, I don't have any political loyalties in Guyana. And I do not have any connections to oil companies in Guyana or out of Guyana, except that I own a few oil stocks, particularly BP. So I buy and sell shares. That's what I do on the part time. So other than that, that's all my my intellectual capital, right? So
All right. So you said you've written a lot about the contract. I'd like to ask you first, on the Stabroek Block Agreement, what are the aspects of the contract to you that were most striking? I know that there's been a lot of debate back and forth about whether the contract is a good contract, whether its provisions allow Guyana to get value for the people. What can you say about your views on that?
well, I mean, I think there's so many people have done excellent work on this, and I get the feeling sometimes like we're beating this dead horse. But well, what a contract signifies to me is the product that we get when there is disunity, and when the party in power uh, does not believe that the opposition has anything to contribute, or um, or there's no one else who can provide some substance except the members on a list, which who are handpicked by a leader of a political party. So the contract to me is really a reflection of this unity. So of course it's a weak contract. It has many loopholes and loose ends and so on. And as I said, I've spent time on the cost side of it and the forecasting of revenues, what the government can expect over time. So it could have been a much better deal if had there been unity, had the APNU AFC government decided, okay, perhaps there's some other people outside of their little cocoon or network, whatever you want to call it. And I'm pretty sure. We'll see where the PvP goes, but we can answer that later on. But you can call it a disunity contract, and I know a lot of people have spent. You see, we cannot talk about the contract in a vacuum because what we have in our contract is a reflection of the greater society, right? And the way we go about doing things. So if you look at my writings on this topic, and I haven't really done anything recently because I feel like we're just going around in circles. Because the two main parties are not committed to this, right? I mean, so it's a set of people who are basically independent who are calling for changing aspects of the contract. I don't think the two main political parties are committed to this. So the reason, and there are reasons. I have reasons why I think that is so, but so what should I say? I mean, it's as I said, we cannot this thing. We have to look at the disunity, the way people are voting, the way people incentivize leaders through their voting. We have to look at the Constitution, all these things about winners and losers in elections. So all these things are a reflection in that contract, which is a major opportunity the country has to mobilize some foreign exchange, some capital for tackling major problems that the country has, infrastructure, climate change, and all these things. So,
Okay, now, one of the things you've written about a lot is costs. Kaieteur News actually carried a story recently from the Director of Finance at the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. His name is Tom Sanzio. And what he said is that Guyana will owe ExxonMobil $20 billion by 2025. And before the show, I actually did a little of reading on something you wrote about the cost recovery. I want to ask you, for how long do you expect in your forecast, how long do you expect Guyana to be repaying Exxon for its investments until its take increases from the 14.5% share of the revenue that we're starting at?
good. Those are really, yeah, that's a good one. So I mean, let's tackle the first one. Let's tackle them in order. Well, you know, okay, Guyana, yes, Guyana owes this money to Exxon, in my interpretation of the contract, because Exxon brought capital, right, and technology and know-how, right. I mean, it just was not easy to extract this oil from the seabed, right? I mean, it took ingenuity, some unique technological breakthroughs to do that. So, I don't know if you can make that statement because I'm not so sure Guyana borrowed this money from Exxon. If Exxon fails, I don't think Guyana has that liability. That's Exxon's liability. However, is recouping its cost and wants to do so in a certain way, and as a profit-making entity, which has its interest, which is to maximize the shareholder value, and of course the retirement package and the pay package of the CEO and the CFO and the top management. Those are its interests, and it will do things that is in its interest. So I don't know why it's packaged like that. That it's is it a loan? I don't think it's a loan, but yes, they are recouping their costs as you would expect. But But of course, I don't think our interest is served well because, as I said in the beginning, that our political leaders are really not serious about. I mean, this is one issue where there should have been no partisanship over. I think the Granger government should have gotten people from all walks of life, and I mean, and some of the mistakes these guys made. I mean, it's just rookie. It's kind of very simple. I mean, this is not highfalutin anything. It's just um, it's some basic understanding of algebra or economics or finance. I mean, so on the other part though, the other part of your question as to would Guyana, when would Exxon recoup its expenses? Well, no one knows, and the reason no one knows is because there is nothing in the contract that has a timeout that says, okay, this is when we will recoup the cost. What the contract says is we will cap our recovery at 75% of whatever the market price is.
Right.
Okay. So if you have a low price, well, you can expect that this process continues long into the process, into the future. And I've written that it probably may continue indefinitely. So, because if you don't tie up these loose ends, well, you can expect that this 75%, so-called 75% cap stays dear. But yeah, I mean, and if we're talking about renegotiation, I mean, we'll talk if how that could be done. But in general, you can those are the parameters you need to address. I mean, because but just tweaking some of those parameters, you can actually increase your intake, right?
Mm.
Okay. So the ring fencing, as people have written about, Christopher Ram and so many others, yes, that's not clear. So if it's not clear, that's the legal dimension of the contract, right? And again, we go back. We like to think that everything can be fixed by law, but you need to have lawyers working with the economists, with the engineers, and a cohesive group, a national group. And I'm sure you could have tied up all these loose ends. Um, so I don't think there is any. Exxon can continue doing it forever. Now, yes, but there's something else I want to say, but I think you might get to it later.
Okay. Why don't you identify the loose ends for me? You say there are loose ends that need to be tied up that could perhaps increase Guyana's share. What are
Oh,
those
yeah.
to you?
Well, the first thing is to figure out, make sure that the cost of one of the project is not spilling over to another project. That's one. But I think one of the biggest things that you can do without even asking for more royalties is to say, why don't Exxon reduce its cap? I think that should be 50%, right?
Mm.
Not 75%, right? If you do that, if you work out the numbers, you'll see that immediately you're starting to bring in billions of dollars more for Guyana. So what you do, even without asking for more royalties, right? You increase your royalty or your de facto royalty, right? So, because remember, it's a simple algebra problem. The it's the cost is made a function of 0.75 market price.
Mm-hmm.
That's like an equation. You substitute into the other equation, and you work out. I get 13.5, by the way. I know a lot of people say it's 14.5, but it's 13.5. You can change that 13.5 to as high as uh, um, um, 28, 30.5% of whatever the market price is every month, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm talking about is everybody keeps running away with the 2%. The 2% is just is the effective royalty, and the effective royalty comes about from adding the profit component and the cost recovery. So you just reduce that. If I were negotiating, I'd say 50%. You should recoup 50%. So if they want to keep not tighten up do the ring fencing, if they recover 50%, they can go as far as they want into the future because I understand finance, and my understanding of finance theory tells me a dollar today is better than a dollar in the future. So that's all I would ask for, and you'd be raking in billions more, right? It's a time value problem. It's a simple present value problem. This is not rocket science. This is finance 101. As a matter of fact, I tell my students about it in first year. So
Okay, so
when these politicians and these jokers are trying to tell us that um, you don't have training in oil sector, they don't know what they're talking about because this is basic stuff. This is nothing sophisticated. It's a time value of money problem. That's what it is.
so the suggestion that you make about reducing the cap from 75 to 50%, I want to explore that a little because you've said that with our current cap and the sheer magnitude of the investments that Guyana will be repaying the company for a very long time, if we reduce the cap to 50%, theoretically, that means Guyana is repaying the investment for much longer.
You are, but you're getting more money up front, right? So
Okay,
when you discount it with a discount rate, your net present value rises, right?
all right.
So
Okay. So I want to explore the number that you just presented, the 13.5%. My understanding is you have the 2% royalty,
hmm
and as for the profit, that comes out after you take out the 75% cost recovery. So you have 25% left, and you split it down the middle. That's 12.5%. That's how I get 14.5. Could you tell me how you got 13.5?
yeah, because my understanding of the contract, and as a matter of fact, I think I saw somebody else, it might be the IMF, did something like this. We've been arguing over this for years now, so I can't. What I did was, you're right. You take the 2% and you add it on to 50% of what is remaining, right?
Mm-hmm.
After you recover 75% of the price. So instead of the profit is not the price minus the cost; it's the 0.98 price minus the cost. If you do that, it's going to work out to 30.5%. All right.
That is interesting. Okay, okay, I
And I
understand.
believe the IMF had done it like that a while ago. So
Okay. Now, one of the things you spoke about when we started
because because there used to be a debate on this because what you have is I think even Starbucks might have carried a few articles on this a
Mhm.
few years ago where the royalty is essentially taken out back in the profit where that 2% is now subtracted 0.98 price minus cost, right? But if it's price minus cost, then we are talking averages here, right? These are units, right? Unit price, unit cost, right? Then you get 0.98 p minus 0.75 p, multiply all of that by 50%, add that to 2%, and you should get 13.5% price every single month, assuming full cost recovery. As a matter of fact, it's on the OGGN website. I actually did this. So instead of us, it's there. So it's on the OGGN.
Okay. Now, when we started a few minutes ago, one of the things you mentioned that I thought was interesting are the societal issues which have inhibited our ability to secure a good contract. And you spoke about a disunity contract. Why don't we talk about those specific issues that you think we need to address before we can get our oil sector running like a well-oiled machine for the Guyanese people?
Well, I mean, uh, I think the ship has left, right? I mean, so I don't know what else you can really um, as I said, it's the ship has gone, right? And we thought that 1992 would have been a new beginning. It wasn't a new beginning. We thought that 2011 would have led to a new beginning. It didn't. And then we thought 2015 would lead to a new beginning. It didn't. So yes, I mean, again, what should we do? I'm just going to regurgitate stuff that I've mentioned in the past. Uh, but I should let you know I'm going to be I'm going to be pessimistic. These are not things that, because I said there's not political will, right? There's not a political will um, to get anything done along this line. Now, I strongly believe that you need the various types of reforms. You need this whole list system that you have in the political parties need to be completely need to be replaced. You need direct representation for members of parliament, so that some talented person who is an independent could break through politically. As you can see right now, what's going to happen is this entrenched voting is going to become much more severe, because the precedent that 2015 set, and the fact that you had 5 months of rigging of the election by controlling the elections commission, that's going to basically spook and scare a lot of people, right? So you can expect the PPP base is not shifting anytime soon. And because, as they say, every action has an opposite reaction, or as the economists would say, these are all strategic responses. My action is a function of your action. My strategy is a function of your strategy. So you can expect that if the PPP base is not going to waver, why should the PNC base waver, right?
Okay. And I'm
So
going to.
it's not going to. It's not going to. So basically, you have third party politics is dead for the foreseeable future. Now, if that is so, but it doesn't mean that these changes often can occur. What should be done? As I said, the list system has to go. You need direct representation of independence, so that an independent person doesn't necessarily need to only compete in national elections, as you have small parties. You can have a talented independent person from Essequibo Coast or Berbice, who is not part of one of the main political forces and can run for election and become a member of parliament, right? To represent the locality, changing in a major way aspects of the Constitution, right? And this term, constitutional reform, has been going around for decades. I mean, this is not a new idea. And a lot of people who've realized that the document doesn't suit us, suit our kind of society. But again, what it does, it gives certain powers to the incumbent. So once you are the incumbent, you tend not to call for changes.
Because you
I
benefit from
mean,
that power.
but not only that, but there's a difference though. I mean, for example, when the PPP was in power prior to 2015, the calls for constitutional change were really from the PNC side, right, and from other small opposition parties. The PPP, when it was in opposition for the last 5 years, it never really, the PPP, in fairness to the PPP loves the Constitution. PPP wants this document. So when the PPP was in opposition, unlike the PNC, it never called for constitutional reform. So this Burnham Constitution is very much loved in the PPP. So
you don't expect that sort of reform that we need from the PPP in this term?
What sort of reforms we need?
The reforms that you have suggested. You're saying the PPP loves the Constitution as it is. So are you saying that you don't expect the PPP to give the country this constitutional reform?
It depends, but I don't think the PPP is. The PPP thinks that it can use the document to get its agenda done, and I mean, the new PVP government is they've done some good stuff already. So I'm not going to, as somebody said recently, I think, don't let the what's the term? Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. But by and large, what the PVP is going to do is it's going to buy stability, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
purchase stability, and which the PNC was not willing to do. You see, it feels that it didn't have to do that, the Granger government, because they had a plan early, and the plan was they're not coming out, right? And so they don't not they can't see farther than their noses. They're so and you see the deciding factor was the PNC. They were going to stay there. I mean, but the deciding factor was the the intervention of the United States. That was the pivotal factor. But the PVP is willing to buy stability. And now I'm talking real politics. I'm not saying that this is the way to go, but this is how the PVP is going to do it. The PVP is going to use vast amounts of patronage, right?
Mm-hmm.
The PVP has made a genuine effort to reach out to the African Guyanese community, as you can see. The Granger government did not. It felt that it would just get in there, it's going to take power and hold power for a long time, right? Now, there is another, and I want you to note, because you asked me what needs to be done. What needs to be done with the oil contract is a function of this, because these are all connected. These things are like an onion, they're wound up in layers and layers and layers. So the PVP is also has made significant progress, which is very interesting from its constitution. It's this cognitive dissonance, this party with Marx-Leninist constitution that's basically become a right-wing party. It's a right-wing pro-business party, right? And what it's been able to do is it's made major progress in courting and befriending the private sector. Okay. And what is even more interesting is the PPP is willing to let the foreign multinationals, the oil companies, stay with the existing contract because it thinks that it's going to serve its interest in retaining power, right? So if we think that you and I can cry how much we want, that's why I don't really write much on this anymore. And I've told Darsh and those on the OGGL,
Mm-hmm.
the PPP is going to keep power by massive amounts of patronage, right? Both to its base and reaching out to the other side. And it's made major progress with business interests in Guyana and now out of Guyana, right? So we can expect that changing this contract is going to be very difficult. I'm sorry for giving you guys such negative news, but I don't see if the PPP is saying the Constitution is great,
Mm-hmm.
right? We know it should be changed. We know that it does not control certain power centers in the economy, right? We've seen that it was handicapped for 5 months, and it took the United States intervention to help the PPP to get back into power, right? So how is it going to keep this power, right? It has to buy that stability. It's not like the PNC, which controls certain power centers. So it felt that it doesn't have to buy stability or purchase stability. It is not that the PNC was not using patronage. You see the whole fiasco with the land and the NISIL and all of that, right? I mean, you guys are reporting some of this. So did not use patronage politics, but their patronage politics stopped at their base, largely the PNC, right? Yes, they courted some private sector people, but for historical reasons, and this is another mistake the PNC made, it made a mistake because it antagonized the business community. It took from its very early on in the post 2015 government, it went about antagonizing the business community, or it sees the business community as its natural, com, um, if as, I don't want to use the word enemy, but I guess that's what I should use. But so the PPP is not in that position, right? So 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 that's how I see it playing out.
I think what I'm sort of getting from you is that you see the PNC or the APNUFC coalition as a weak opposition, and so the PPP will not have a difficult time holding on to office because it knows well how to consolidate its support base and build on that.
Yes, the PPP can do politics better, and they understand the power of patronage better. I mean, Mr. Jagier would be a genius in this, right? So, um, I mean, I don't think anybody can beat him at that. Now, I don't know. We're gonna. I used to be 50-50 on that, but I'm starting to think that the PvP. We'll see the PNC. We'll see what the PNC can do. We'll see if we have the post 1997 situation developing where the PNC back in 97 and after was able to mount a credible resistance, right? Force the PvP into some constitutional change and reform, which, by the way, um, many of them were not thought out well, right? Um, but still did not address the crucial problems the country faced, the hardness and accord, and those sets of reforms. But we'll see. We will know in about a year or so. We'll see if the PNC can mount the similar resistance as in the past. But I think many factors have changed. Well, not many, but one or two factors where the PVP has decidedly defended the foreign business interests and the local business interests. So it's going to be extremely hard, but we'll see. That to me is the pivotal break from the past,
Okay.
unlike 1997. Yeah.
Listeners and viewers, we're just going to go on a 1 minute break and we'll be back with you in a moment.
Hi, I'm Alana.
Hi, I'm Casual.
And we want you to tune into the Morning Rush.
Right here on 99.1 and 99.5, powered by Digicel.
Digital is not a buzzword, it is a culture. At Digicel, we've made it our mission to enrich your digital lives. That's why we're bringing together more of all the experiences you love. The best and widest variety of music, podcast and local radio, cloud storage, messaging, and more. Welcome to Digital at Digicel. Digicel, better together.
Good night, everyone, again. I am Kemol King, the host of Kaieteur Radio's Petroleum 101. Tonight I am joined by Dr. Taran Kemraj. He is a professor of economics, and he's been talking to us tonight about oil, gas, and other economics issues. I see that the conversation has more delved into the political realm now. Dr. Kemraj, you've made some suggestions for changes that you think need to be made in order to improve Guyana's political system and its management. I want to take us to your suggestion to reform this list system that we have. Is it your advocacy for, I'd say, I don't know, giving more strength to third parties and smaller parties? What is your rationale for supporting this sort of reform?
Yes, well, it might be very difficult for third parties to now compete at the presidential level. So, as I said, the last 4 or 5 years, have shown us are going to make a lot of people scared to split their votes, right? But what you are likely to have, even though people might not be willing to shift away from voting for the president, right, from their base, they might be more willing to split their votes for an MP, right? You know, in the U.S. they call it the splitting of the tickets, right? Some people vote for a senator who is a Republican but voted for Biden, right? So, it's likely that you can have a situation where um, not necessarily facilitating independent political parties, but
Mm-hmm.
independent people and individuals who might want to break into parliament, right? So it is without going through the list of one of the main political parties. Okay, so that's the rationale. The rationale is to incentivize and empower people who can compete fairly um, in elections to go to parliament, right? Because as I said, getting people to vote differently at the presidential level might be very difficult in the coming period. So, coming few years, perhaps 2, 3 decades.
Okay, now, as an economist, I want to talk a little about Guyana's GDP and other indicators that we're using to um, determine the wealth of the country as opposed to how the people are doing. One of the things I've noticed recently is that we can get very good numbers when we look at our GDP. We say Guyana is going to grow 86% in 2020. Then it dropped to 50 something, and then it came down to 26. These are all really big numbers. But when you come down to the level of the people, you can realize that most of that money that's contributing to that big numbers in the oil sector, and the people may not necessarily be feeling it. So I guess my question is, what indicator do you think would be um, a better one to tell us the state of the people?
Yeah, I mean, so we do a very bad job in statistics, right? Collecting statistics. The Bureau of Statistics is extremely weak. Um, the GDP is a big snapshot that tells you the aggregate, and it's not even the better aggregate if you want to use an aggregate. But you ask, so some people suggest using the GNP or the GNI, right? To that, so that those things differentiate between the income that's generated by the nationals versus
Oh,
non-nationals.
can you
So,
tell our listeners what those are for before you continue?
the growth, so Exxon gross domestic product will be large, right?
Hmm.
Because, or there will be, as you said, 28% increase.
Yeah.
But what percent of that income actually stays in Guyana is going to be much smaller. So, so what the gross national income does, it adjusts, it takes the GDP and looks for the income that are coming from Guyanese nationals and Guyanese businesses. Okay, and after it makes that adjustment, you'll find that the GNP might be very small. Or
Hmm.
if you look at contractions in some other sector, perhaps sugar and so on, who knows? It's the GNI or gross national income um, might actually decline, right? So so that is really that's a snapshot. But I was getting more down into the micro level
Hmm.
because you asked what really measures the well-being. You said what measure, but there's no single measure, right? That is why good statistical agencies, whether the statistical office in Jamaica, for example, which is an excellent office. I mean, you have some developing countries like Uganda and Jamaica. They do very good job at picking up these statistics, right? Of course, and the United States has the best statistical capabilities, but these are models that we should try to follow. So one of the things that we need to know would be the labor force participation rate, right? What percentage of the population is actually working? That's an important number. We don't know that number.
Hmm.
I know the previous government, in fairness to Mr. Jordan, he tried to do some work on the unemployment statistics, but there's still a lot more that needs to be done. We not only need to know employment and unemployment, the aggregate, we need to know by sector. What's the daily oil sector versus bauxite versus gold versus retail versus sugar or rice, right? So that is the way you can start to think about welfare. Then not just the employment, though, or we need to know the trends in wages in these sectors, right? And not until you know the trends in wages that you can start fully appreciating the more micro level effects, right?
Yes.
Then now this is not, again, these are not difficult stuff. They just need people to be employed, and the government needs to have a political will to allow these statistics to get done and computed, right? And of course, we haven't been having regular surveys on poverty. We need to know what percentage of population would be in poverty. We need to know some information and basic information on income inequality. That would be an important statistic, right? Even if you have little, you can have decile measurements. I mean, it would be an improvement over what exists today, right? Um, so there's a lot of statistics that we need that to make these judgments. So when people, if people, so it becomes a political. You can make political statements without verifying them, and that's really what is difficult, right? In Guyana, because we cannot say for sure, yeah, what's the monthly unemployment. Then we have to know not just unemployment, but it will be useful to know our business cycle, to know what component of the unemployment and the labor force participation, right? This is important. Both are important. What component is increasing and decreasing with the business cycle, right? There's going to be a cyclical dimension. But then that's not all. They're going to be a seasonal dimension. It will be good to know that too, right? And then, of course, we need to know the structural dimension, right? What is there disguised unemployment, underemployment? These are all things that you can look at, right? Do you want to work full time, but you can't get full time work? The most you can do is part time, right?
Yes.
So these are all things that you can look at, and that will give you a big picture, right? Not just a macro picture of what's going on with GDP or GNI or GNP. Okay, you get a picture on the ground at the industry level. So we get a better idea of what's going on, and then you can make better welfare's connections and statements, right?
Okay. No.
But as of now, nobody really can.
Okay.
Anyone who's telling you they can't because we don't have the statistics to do it.
We're down to our final 10 minutes of the show. We actually have a comment and a question for you. Someone texted Kaieteur Radio saying, Taran, you are so eloquent. You are the technocrat that's missing in Guyana. Please get on board and help our brothers and sisters. So the question this person is posting is whether you have any intention to come to Guyana to help our government renegotiate the contract with Exxon.
Well, I mean, the contract is, you probably don't need to talk to me anymore because I've done all of this for free, right?
Yeah.
I just give you free advice there. They're probably going to get a foreigner who's going to tell them about time value of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if the person is not going to tell them, they're telling them about time value of money, but it's finance 101, right? It's a basic idea. So that's free advice. If you can get it from 75 to 50%, you're going to rake in billions of dollars. Why keep fussing over the royalties when you can get more royalty by not asking for royalties, right? That's free advice, free service to the country. Well, I'm always open. I mean, Guyana's situation is the office politics, however, can actually be more vicious than the national politics. You know this, right? I mean, so in terms of each political party has is a cult, right? It's like a cult, and then in this cult, you have people are very insecure, right? So then you not only will have to deal with the national politics, you're going to have to deal with the office politics. And as a matter of fact, that can be more debilitating than the national politics, actually, because at some level, I think, whether it's Mr. Granger or Mr. Jagdio or President Ali, I think they're not going to be petty, but the people who will be petty are the second level managers, right? That's really the problem. You see, when people talk about diaspora engagement and all of that, it's another conversation. I don't have any conversation on diaspora engagement anymore, because getting a brochure is not diaspora engagement, right? So when I see the president of Guyana, right, and the leader of the opposition make serious decisions and think about complementarity, nobody is saying that somebody from the diaspora should come and replace Guyanese skills. I don't think it's fair, right? It's
All right.
absolutely, it would be very unfair. But there must be complementarities, right? And I am shocked, as of this date, no president has asked the question, what are these complementarities? Unless they ask this, you're not getting anywhere. So I don't even get involved in those discussions. As you know, I don't even write columns anymore to Fabric News. So because we're just going around in circles. So when those are the people have to gotta set the tone, because I don't want to be there and have to deal with office politics. I have about 20 ideas I'm trying to write on and figure out. So, but I'm always open. As I said, I'm always open. I mean, but it's the leadership that have to make the decision what are the roles we can play without displacing Guyanese, right? But the contract, as I said, is going to be. I've given you several reasons why the contract may not be renegotiated. Unfortunately, I can't. I don't think I can leave you at a more positive note tonight, but that's the best I can do. But I'm always open. I mean, if these guys can just download all the columns I've written from 2009 to 2019 December, that's the last I wrote a column, right? You'll see a lot of my thoughts. It doesn't have all my thoughts on these matters, but a lot of it would be in there. They're scattered in some Kaieteur News columns. When I wrote them for the AFC back in the day, they're scattered in the letter columns. And this doesn't include the academic papers that are more formal, but that you're writing for a different audience. There's another reason for that. So these are all free stuff. I mean, ideas are free. So they're going to find some consultant to tell them the same stuff we've said for decades.
Okay.
And that is fine.
Here's the question I'm going to close the show with tonight. What advice would you give to Ghana's leaders, and not necessarily just from an economic standpoint, but I'd say based on your comments about the PPP and the PNC and how they have interfaced with their support bases of late. I know just now we had 5 months of election rigging, and you spoke a lot about disunity. What advice would you give to the government and opposition about how they can break that disunity?
Well, I mean, again, I'm not so sure it's our job to really give unsolicited advice, although I just give you some on how to get more money from the contract. But I think it would be presumptuous to really tell these guys what to do. I mean, they've learned a lot of stuff, and they pretty much know what they're going to do. But I am looking for signals. What I can do is look for signals. So if you tell me the diaspora is important, well, then you can both team up in Parliament and rescind this nonsense where a diaspora member or somebody with a dual citizenship, cannot be an MP. That's something that should never happen. That's a law that should have been removed a long time ago. When I see that, then I will say, okay, the leadership is serious. When I see, don't give me a brochure. It's a joke, right? A brochure on diaspora is a joke. Go pass a law. Get the PNC, President Ali, get the PNC and pass a law that says people who have dual citizenship should not be barred from being a member of Parliament.
Okay.
That's and then I would say, okay, these guys are serious. And then I will probably start to be convinced that the office politics will not be as bad as the national politics.
Okay, Dr. Kemaraj, thank you for your insight. We've had quite a fruitful discussion over the past hour. Guyana has a lot of issues that it needs to address, and I hope that your advice will not reach deaf ears. So,
Oh well, thanks for having me on. I will say I think there's appears to be some. It's very interesting to observe the PPP proceed in its own way. I mean, it's as I said, the PPP wants the constitution, and but it's making genuine attempts to work within the confines, within its world, the way it understands the world, which is you must purchase loyalty, you must buy loyalty, and it's probably going to work. And the PNC will need to pull its shoes, watch itself, because if it cannot come up with a formula like the PPP, well, there we go.
okay. Folks, you were listening to Petroleum 101 here on Kaieteur Radio. Please join us next week, Tuesday. We're going to have another guest and have another fruitful discussion on how the government is handling your wealth. So without further ado, I say goodbye and see you next week. A lot has happened since 2015, when oil was first discovered off Guyana's shores. The petroleum industry is an ever-changing web of oil, gas, politics, and money.